Welcome to The Art of Dress. Today I'm happy to share with you the spacing of neckline and the spacing of your prints. So in just a minute I'll show you what I mean by that, and thank you for coming and thank you for subscribing. In order to start our discussion of prints, I want to take you back to what we talked about last week in the last video, and I also want to point out what we didn't talk about. So as you remember, we looked first of all that there are 4 categories of prints, and we talked about the different dimensions of those prints and how you would tell the difference between one and another. And the second thing we talked about is we talked about the styles wearing one of those categories of prints. And by looking at the number of the style on this wheel, you could see the size of the motif. So the wheel is showing you the styles arranged in order of fabric weight, scale, or size of motif, and how much simplicity. And so the numbers, whatever number you saw for your style symbol, is the size of your motif. So now I want to talk about what this doesn't explain, and that is the spacing of your print. So let's take, for example, a flower, a floral print. So you can have a tiny little flower, and it can be very closely connected to another flower on the print, all right next to each other. And that would be a very tight spacing. Or you could have the same size flower and you could have widely spaced on your print. And the same with a large flower. You could have them close together, or you could have them medium apart or far apart. Where does this come in? And how in the world would you know? So the interesting thing about it, of course, it's not connected at all, as you would see from those examples. A small print is not necessarily right next to another print, nor is it necessarily wide apart. But what it is connected to is the neckline of the person wearing the print. So what I'm going to show you is that of our necklines, so just want to remind you about neckline. Okay, there are 4 necklines. There's a V-neckline, and that's worn by an earth style. There's a halter neckline, and that's worn by a fire style. There is a scoop or round neckline, and that's always worn by an air style. And the last one is a boat neckline or a square neckline, and that's always worn by a water style. If you are a water style, you wear a square or boat neckline. If you are an air style, you wear a scoop or round neckline. You are a fire style, you wear a halter form, some form of a halter neckline. And if you are an earth style, you wear a V neckline. Now, when you have a V neckline, for example, it can be very, very different one from the next. You can have a very tight V, very close to your neck, or you can have a very wide V that goes to the edge of your shoulders. And notice that we are not talking about cleavage or depth of neckline. We are specifically referring only to width. But when you're wearing a very tight V neckline, you're showing almost no skin between your neck and your shoulder. And if you're wearing a very wide V, you're showing almost all the skin between your neck and your shoulder. I don't know what's left out. I think you're showing all the skin. And thinking of it that way becomes really helpful when you're talking about halters, because if you wear a crossed halter, you're showing a lot of skin between neck and shoulder. And if you're wearing a wide halter, you're showing very little out here. So we're going to look at the necklines and how the width of neckline varies according to the different styles, but it doesn't vary by style, it varies for the different styles. So we're going to start with the narrowest of all the necklines, and it's 2 people that wear a V neckline, and the first one is Frida Gustafsson Refined Classic. Frida Gustafsson wears a very narrow neckline. And what I'm telling you is that because she wears a narrow neckline, she also wears a very small amount of space between her prints. Her prints are very small, but that's not actually the point here. The point is they are right on top of each other. They are juxtaposed on top of each other. And that is why her neckline, or I don't know that there's causation here, it's more like it's connected. I don't know which is the cause, but it's connected because she also wears a very small amount of space, almost none, between her neck and between the edge of her neck and her neckline. It just comes right to the edge of her neckline, or even smaller, as I'm going to show you an example. So first of all, let's look at this print when it's worn with a V-neck jacket. And you can see that it looks just amazing poking out of a very small V neckline because so much is already happening with the print. She can do this. So it really works for her. And of course, she can also wear a very narrow V neckline in a dress. She doesn't have to be this narrow. She can go out here. These are not rigid, iron rules. It's just that she can wear the narrowest of the V necklines. But there's someone else that can wear an equally narrow neckline, and that is Josephine Scriver Refined Natural. So this narrowness of her neckline, a V identical, I guess, to just Frida Gustafson, she also can wear shapes that are right next to each other. So she is the one who wears a checkerboard. And this is not exactly a checkerboard, but it's very reminiscent, and the size is really close, and the V is there. So because of all these reasons, I picked this dress, but checkerboard would be actually like a signature fabric for Refined Natural. And Josephine, as you can see, looks just amazing with this kind of a print. So the squares are right next to each other, and the V is right next to her neck. So the next up so that would be number 1 out of 7 for narrowness, okay, smallness of neckline. Next up is one of the halters. And here you see Leah Kabede. Now, I actually just could not find a single example of her wearing a print with a halter. So what I just want you to notice is, you see on the top of her shoulder there where the little floral band, so that's like that's about how much skin shows between there and her shoulder, which is where the flowers start up again, a very small amount. Actually, it's even a little bit dropped. So the black is even larger than how much skin she shows. But she wears the wide halter that shows a very small amount of skin. And you can see here that her flowers, which are not small, but they are worn. They look best quite close together. Not right on top like the last example, like number 1 for Frida and for Josephine, but with just a little bit of space. And here's her partner, the other halter neckline, the other wide halter neckline, which is Elaborate Romantic, and of course Jordan. And you can see that not only are the space really showing you that there's a little space, small, but a little bit of space, but not too much. And then a wide halter that shows just a little bit of the skin from the edge of the halter to her shoulder. Not off the shoulder, but to where a shoulder seam would be. So not very much, a wide halter. So this would be the second smallest of the necklines. The third example is going to start with Chanel Iman. She is a water style. She wears a boat neckline, and she wears the kind of print. She wears the sleeve print that has forms that are not systematic, and you can see that here. But there is some space because she is number 3 for spacing, and she's also number 3 for the size, the width of her boat neckline. And so that's not all the way at the edge of her collarbone. It's just past the neck a little bit, just enough to actually show the square. And that's what she's wearing here. It's not really clear, but it looks so good on her. And then it comes up to the shoulder And so this is the neckline portion is what we're looking at. Really cute. Similar width of neckline, or actually identical width of neckline, is Arlenis Sosa, who is true natural. And for the first time, what we have is first and only time we have a round neck paired with a square neckline. But that is partly because the round neckline, they're just so similar in the neckline because when it just opened out a little bit, it's so slightly rounded. If she wears it lower, she has to go more round, but when it's just like this, it's actually hard to tell the difference between a square neckline and a round neckline at this like brief level. So number 3 for the width of her neckline, and number 3 for the spacing of her prints. And you can see that here. This is an awake print if you look at it, and you can see the green and the flowers are actually forming like a unit, and then there's some space and then it starts up again. And so that's approximately a 3 amount of spacing. So the next example, now we're going back to a boat neck. And this is Candace Swanepoel True Dramatic, and you might remember that she is the most alpha of all the styles. But she does not wear the most alpha neckline, she wears the exact middle. The exact middle, 4 out of 7, her boat neckline, and it's a really perfect example here. You can see it's just past an opened out round neckline. It's just, you can see it's just to the right at the collarbone on her neck. And that's the exact middle between her neck and her shoulder. And so this is an awake print. It's pretty good. As you can see, it's absolutely an awake print. It's maybe a little tight, and some of the flowers are spaced a little tightly, but others are quite open. So all in all, it's an amazing example for Candace. And the exact same neckline is worn by Joan Smalls, and she is not alpha at all. She is almost the most omega. She's the second most omega of all the styles. So you can see that the necklines are not in any way connected up with silhouette. But these are both water styles, and these are both boat necklines. And in Joan's case, you can see that a wide strap works really well for her. She can wear any of the geometric prints. A diamond is absolutely ideal for her, but a polka dot is great. And she would like to see a wee bit more spacing than I was able to find here. I really chose this example for the width of neckline, and the spacing is a little bit tight on her polka dots. You'd like to see a little bit, just a little bit wider spaced, maybe every other one even. Now the size of the polka dot is ideal because she's only number 3 for size, but the spacing of the polka dots here is a little bit too close together. The neckline is perfect. So now we go to the air styles, and these are the next group. This is now 1 past middle, so 5 out of 7. And you can see here that we're talking only about the width of neckline. We're not talking about the depth. So you can see that this is just past, especially you can see it on the right-hand side. The left is a little weird on the left side of the picture, but the right-hand side of the picture, just really beyond, supposed to be just beyond that collarbone section. But the print spacing is really good, especially when you realize that there are 2 sizes here of little dots, and the print is, the larger dots are spaced ideally, because they also give a little bit of texture. So in this case, the neckline is a tiny bit narrow, and the spacing of the print is perfect. And the next example, also an air style, the same exact neckline. Here we see the perfect round neckline for these 2 styles. And this is the next group. This is just past the middle. This is 5 wide out of 7, and the spacing of the print is supposed to be also the 5 out of 7. And it is, if you consider the green flowers, the dark green flowers are spaced just about 5 out of 7. So that's perfect. So the next example is, now we go back to the second halter. So different from the first halter. The first halter was showing almost no skin. The crossed halter is like almost completely exposed. It's the second largest amount of skin from where the crossed halter comes to at the neck to the shoulder. And so you can see quite a significant difference between these halters. So this is the second largest, almost the largest, and the prints for Yasmin Gowri, elaborate classic, amazing. Yasmin Gowri, you can see that those medallions, whatever they are on her overskirt, are quite spaced apart, even though they themselves are relatively small. And her partner for this kind of neckline is Micah Janelli. Again, amazing in a crossed halter. And for her print, which I wasn't able to find in a crossed halter, but here you see, her print is quite spaced apart. This is 6 out of 7, even though the sizes are relatively small for her. She's just pure middle in terms of the size of her flower, organized with structure, which makes it an awake print, but spaced 6 out of 7 apart. Just amazing on her. And you can see how good it looks. And the last neckline, 7 out of 7, is the wide V. And you've seen this on Elle Fanning so many times, True Classic Omega, that I thought we could get away with this where she has the ties are off her shoulder for this picture, but you really can see the spacing. The ties could be there to show the wide V, but you really can see the spacing of her print, both on her bodice and her skirt. So even though her motif is about the same as Yasmin Gowri, the spacing is 7 out, is the widest of all the spacings, and looks fantastic on her. And the last example is Rosie Huntington Whiteley, and she is also the wide V neckline. You've seen it many times. This picture, only the strap on the right is in the right place, but that's what looks so good on her at the very edge of her shoulder. And it's so nice that this is a wide strap because she is an Omega style. And then you can see on the skirt, especially, you see how the two flowers are on opposite hips. And then she has one way up here at the raised waistline. And so the flowers are, in her case, both large and far apart, but the spacing is 7, the spacing of her neck is 7, matches really well, and it's just beautiful for her. So thank you for sharing this with me today. And this is the last of the style artistry videos. I actually had to come back and do this one after the artistry videos because I hadn't done this work before to show you. I had actually done the initial work on it, but to find the images was took me some time. So I just wanted to finish up, and then we're going to start coloring. So coloring is so exciting. But we're going to change something else as well, because now I'm launching my website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post content on the website 1 week, and the next week I'm going to have a new video. So it'll go back and forth, one to the next, as far as I can plan. And so we're going to start coloring at the same time that I'm going to launch and start filling in the content specific to every style, coloring, and artistry on the website. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope that you'll join me. And in the meantime, thank you for coming today and for subscribing, and please take care.